Now, Qatar forms the evil axis that supports Hamas. It funds it, it harbors it, and it is the foundation on which Hamas has erected itself. The Islamist terrorist organizations like ISIS, Hezbollah, Muslim Brotherhood and Al-Qaeda all have been given safe havens by Qatar. The Qatari mouthpiece Al Jazeera has been used extensively to spread the Hamas propaganda. This has seen the Arab countries severing ties with Qatar back in 2017. It was famously called the Qatar diplomatic crisis. The Israel war on Hamas has brought the Qatar cooperation with the Arab world into question once again. Will the Arab countries sever ties with Qatar? Is there going to be repercussions that will have to be faced by Qatar, by the Arab nations and the United States of America? Well, it's a wait and watch situation. Let's start my conversation with Professor Madhav Nalapat. And Professor, a situation which has reoccurred in the past as well. I mentioned about the 1917 crisis that Qatar had to face, where the Arab nations had severed all their ties. That led to the United States then coming in 2021 to be a mediator in allowing for reinstating these ties. Could there be a possibility that the same happens today as well? Or is the Arab world standing strongly behind Hamas?
Look, the Arab world is not standing behind Hamas. The fact is that the Arab world shifted away from Qatar because the Qatari royal family is the only royal family that has continued to support Wahhabi extremism, or which is, apart from Iran. Iran is supporting Khomeiniist extremism, and Wahhabi extremism is being supported by Qatar, and neither represent the Sunni or Shia streams of Islam, but both of which are overwhelmingly moderate. Now, how has Qatar escaped so far? In my view, they are doing it because they have played the game that Pakistan had been playing, being useful to opposing sides. Pakistan has been very useful to China. It gives information to China, including about U.S. assets in its territory. It gives information possibly to the United States, possibly about Hamas itself. And that is the excuse it uses to support Hamas, which, by the way, is very pleasing to their other superpower friend, China. So I think they have perfected this art of basically doing odd jobs, really odd jobs, dangerous jobs for both sides. And that is why they have got this kind of immunity. But I want to say, Megha, as far as the United States is concerned, it's a mistake to keep on backing Qatar when 28 of the top leaders of Hamas are staying there. The reality is, America has paid a very heavy price for relying on Pakistan in Afghanistan. You have seen the pell-mell withdrawal and the complete defeat of the US in Afghanistan. The same will happen to the US across the Middle East if it continues to just give a wink and a nod to Qatar. I think it needs to hold Qatar to account and prevent that kingdom from essentially, from continuing in the extremist path. Every other state has moved into a path of moderation. The wise leadership of Saudi Arabia, the wise leadership of the UAE, of Oman, of Bahrain, all these countries, Iraq, they've all moved away from extremism. Why is Qatar the only outlier among the Arab sheikdoms that clings on to extremism and support extremism? It's time to call them out.
Savio, we take a look at the history of Qatar now, sometimes on, sometimes off relationship that it shares with the rest of the Arab world. Why no disdain for Qatar when there are 20 of these Hamas leaders who have again gained shelter in Oman? Sorry, in Doha.
Megha, it's important to understand where the Qatar and the Hamas relationships actually started. So let me give you some statistics, okay? The Qatar funding of Hamas had two phases. The first phase was between the period of 2007 to 2014. And that time, Qatar government saw it fit to basically support the Hamas because there was not much of international supervision at that time, and a lot of people were not paying attention to Qatar's role in funding Islamic radicalism, Islamic terrorism, in the sense to try and have some sort of control over the Middle East. So that was the first phase. The second phase started in 2014. And this was sadly a phase in which the US and Israel actually worked with Qatar to ensure that Hamas has an economic upliftment in order to take them away from terrorism. Because if you remember in 2014, Israel launched what was the Operation Protective Edge. Operation Protective Edge was because at that point of time, you had Hamas that, very similar to the attack this time, they shot a lot of rockets into Israel and several people died. But the attack this time in 2023, which is 9 years after that incident, you have Hamas coming in with full-fledged terror into Israel, So what changed? They thought that they would be able to tame the beast, which is Islamic radicalism, which is Islamic terrorism. Islamic radicalism breeds Islamic terrorism. So US, Israel, along with using Qatar, they thought that they would be able to tame the beast of Islamic radicalism. In 9 years, they haven't been able to tame that beast. And that beast is what you saw on October 7th. In full display for the world, in the barbarity of what that beast could do. So today, if you have to look at Qatar, Qatar wants to make a point of view in the Arab world. The reasons they were a part of the FIFA World Cup, the way they pushed it, the way they got it, was to try and create an image that this small little Arab nation is far greater than the other two competing Arab nations, which is Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates. If you see the Abraham Accords, it was UAE, Bahrain that were the ones to take the first lead. Then you had Saudi Arabia that was edging close to signing the Abraham Accords and arriving at a peace talk with Israel. But that had to be derailed. Now, who wants it derailed? Who are the players? The players are very simple. If you just take a step back and watch it, you have Hamas. Hamas does not have the brain to pull out the operation that happened on October 7th. It required strategic and tactical support that it got from Iran. The funding came from Qatar. But the overall supervision of the control of the crisis in the Middle East at this point of time is China. The reason China wants a crisis in the Middle East, it wants to derail the Abraham Accords. The Abraham Accords gives the US government a hold in the Middle Eastern region with nations like Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and the others working towards what is considered to be US progress in the Middle East. China does not want that. China wants its activities, its investments. If you look at the kind of investments that are made in Iran, in fact, if in 2021, if I'm not mistaken, China came out and said that they're going to invest about 400 billion in Iran itself. The same kind of focus they need on areas like Gaza, they need that focus in areas like Qatar, and that's why China's hegemony is the real game in the conflict in Israel.
Right.
And that's why we need to pay attention.
So then, why have Qatar back in the fold when the Arab world and United States of America have tasted the bitter medicine, seen Qatar and its ways in pushing terrorism? Muslim Brotherhood, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, they've all been given safe havens in Qatar. Qatar has had to face the repercussions of it. It was completely cut off by air, by land and by sea, where stoppages and obstructions had been put by Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, all the other, Jordan, all the other, Egypt, all the other Arab nations. So why come back and reconciliate with Qatar when you know the situation hasn't really improved at all? RVS Mani.
As has been pointed out by the previous speakers, Qatar has been two-timing both with the United States in a cordial relationship as well as long as it suits it, and also working as a pawn in the hand of China. Now you see the G20 declaration about the Middle East corridor, which India is planning towards Europe. That was one of the potential. It is my view is that the Pradhan Mantri of the G20 under India's chairmanship announced that thing. See, it just took around 30 years to really trigger a crisis in to really challenge it, because lot of investments as put by SABU are now getting sunk in the Chinese investments are getting affected directly out of that. There's a very clear impact assessment of that. That is one perspective of it. But yes, Qatar has been home to Hezbollah, it has been home to Hamas, it's been home to several other ISIS and all, and also in connection, in collusion with the Muslim Brotherhood, which is a huge issue, which is a huge institution. They have been pampering to this, giving them facilities, etc., etc. The Hamas existence is purely because of its homeland in Qatar. The top 20 leaders are there. But having said that, it is, in spite of the fact that even now, after the 7th October, it has been taken to the United Nations. The Security Council is being vetoed by the two major members, out of which one is very prominently China. It's a very clear revelation that Chinese hand has been in this very clearly. I do not know, we cannot confirm it. It is a revelation, and Chinese assets are getting affected. It's basically economics of the war, because Qatar is one agent which is two-timing both United States and the China. And in this case, I think the Chinese have won it over the United States as an ally of Qatar. And that is the reason this triggered. This is my submission of it. Of course, more and more things will reveal, because the United Nations, that veto by China and Russia was a one major revelation, in spite of the fact that this has happened. And that is how it pans out. It pans out over a period of time. Let us see how it further comes out.
Okay.
In this matter.
Professor Nalapathy, if I could bring to you the list of properties, businesses, banks that are owned by Qatar in United States of America and Britain alone, it would be a staggering billions and billions of dollars of investment. So how, even if America tried to cut off from Qatar, there is no way it can do that.
Well, Megha, the fact of the matter is that quite likely the Qataris' excuse is that they are providing information on Hamas and the other terror groups that they are basically funding. They are providing information about the Muslim Brotherhood. They are providing information about, the extremist forces that they are backing. This is the same game that Pakistan played. Pakistan said, we are giving you information. That information turned out to be completely contrary to the interests of the United States. The Pakistanis pointed to pro-Taliban warlords and said, these people are anti-Taliban. They pointed to anti-Taliban warlords and said, these people are Taliban. And the United States fell for it hook, line and sinker. As a consequence, many anti-Taliban people were basically hit by the United States, and pro-Taliban people were given millions of dollars on the recommendation of Pakistan. Now, if you're doing anything with any organization, including, if I may say so, a terror organization such as Hamas, then I can tell you, you are going to suffer the way the United States has suffered in Afghanistan. Because the Qataris will only give you doctored information. They have made a pact with Wahhabism, and they have made a pact with Iran as well, and with China. And this is the situation. So just as Pakistan led America up the garden path in Afghanistan, I think Washington needs to be very careful not to allow Qatar to lead America up the garden path so that these terror organizations continue. Eliminating this terror organization is very important for security of the Middle East. And last, Megha, the Qataris have been active in regime change operations. Look at the way Al Jazeera was blasting Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. Look at the way the Qataris have been attacking some other Gulf leaders through their various pamphleteers who are encouraged by them, various social media people, and of course Al Jazeera. Look at their treatment of Mohammed bin Salman, the first Al-Saud to walk away from Wahhabism. And this is what they did. So the reality of the situation is, quite frankly, no matter what information the United States is getting from Qatar about Hamas, about Wahhabis, and about China, it will be giving information to China about America, and America, it will be giving information about China. This is, as Mr. Mani knows, exactly what the Pakistanis have been doing. The only point is the Chinese get operationally good information and the Americans get operationally counterproductive information. That's what's happening to America now, where Qatar is concerned.
Saviuddin, the point that Qatar continues to argue, saying that it is then going to be a mediator in finding a peace agreement deal between Hamas and bringing in these, I think 20 of these Hamas leadership have now arrived in Qatar. Who's Qatar selling this and who's buying it?
Hello. Can you hear me, Megha?
Yeah.
1 second.
I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. So primarily what we need to understand is that the reason Qatar funds Islamic radicalism and Islamic terrorism is in order for it to have a substantial control in the Middle East. Qatar comes from a thought process that if it needs to create inroads around the world, it needs to have a strong beast along with it to ride on. And that beast is Islamic radicalism. So you have three major countries in the Islamic world that are playing around with the Islamic radicalism beast. One is Qatar, the other one is Iran, and the third country is Turkey. Each of them has the ambition that a Middle Eastern nation will control the world, and they will control the world through radicalized thoughts. And that's exactly what you see played out. Qatar might have all the glitz and glamour that it would like to portray, like Dubai and Abu Dhabi, but within its core, it has always been a very fundamental Arab nation, and it believes that if it has to control the rest of the world and influence the rest, then it needs to have a certain amount of hold on the Islamic radicalized beast. And this is exactly what Qatar is doing. It's been doing that with Hamas, it's been doing that with Hezbollah, and it fits completely into China's plan because China needs a disturbed Middle East in order to show US in bad light. But when you go in to see what China does to the Muslim communities in its own backyard, you will realize that for China, the real game is global conquest, to conquer through investments in infrastructure, investments in companies, and to proxy wars. That's what China does.
Irina also on the telecast with me. The situation at this point in time aggravating. There is no sight of peace that takes place in the Israeli-Gaza border. In a situation such as this, Qatar has come across as an ally more of Iran and China and Russia than in support of the Arab countries and America. Now, is this then going to be a matter of just days when Arab world again decides itself to sever its ties with Qatar, or the situation at this point in time grim because all these Arab nations have come out, they have not come out in support of Hamas, but they at this point of time are criticizing the Israeli forces of targeting Palestinians.
Well, the situation is indeed complicated, and the GCC is no longer united. Qatar has been continuously attacking its neighbor Bahrain, a tiny country that out of all of the GCC states, and in fact out of all of the Arab world, has come out the strongest attacking Hamas and has suffered the consequences, with Hamas lashing out at them and essentially calling them Arab scum, excuse the expression, on air. And Qatar has also been underhandedly attacking other of its neighbors while financing with money. After the Alula agreement, the Arab states have been pretty much stuck. Qatar did not have to fulfill any of the 13 demands by the Arab states that they were concerned about. None of the security issues between Qatar and its neighbors have been resolved, and yet Qatar has benefited single-handedly from the financial considerations of this agreement. And now these same Arab states have also normalized with Iran, which is Qatar's close ally on the issue of Hamas, and they feel the pressure of having to accommodate Iran, which has, by the way, continued using its proxies to attack the same Arab states. That includes a recent Houthi attack on a border town with Saudi Arabia, which killed 4 police officers. So they clearly, on a certain level, they have to understand that both of these states are a threat to their own interests and security. And yet Saudi Arabia led the Muslim world, the Arab world, by coordinating the statement with Qatar and Iran, not UAE and Bahrain, which were far more. UAE statement was far more balanced, and the Bahrain statement was actually joined with the United States in addition to its own independent states.
Okay, fair enough. Then RVS Many, again the same question I ask: is there a possibility of severing trade ties with Qatar, or is it as difficult as it is to sever ties with China?
In some ways,
sorry. This is for RVS Many. I'll come back to you, Irina.
I will put it this way. We do not know what is the level of investments which have happened under the Indian trade units of that, but there is a ballpark figure. Do we really suffer because around 16 to 20% of the Indian highly skilled persons are of Indian origin, and if at all Qatar has to take any precipitate action, it will also affect their industry, and we have that strength in that the demographic dividend or the skilled investments or whatever it is, we have around 20% of the people, and they also have over a period of years have also settled themselves very well. So that is one thing lurking on that, whether they bother for it, whether they take into consideration, or they are into only service or investment-based asset creation, that is a matter for future results. But at the same time, when you talk of Qatar being a mediator, I do not know in the current given situation, it has the real credibility to be a mediator between Hamas and Israel, because having given asylum to 20 plus Hamas leaders, how do you expect the objectivity of the Qatar, non-partisan objectivity of the Qatar is always at a question mark. Plus, moreover, whose agenda are they carrying even in the process? Because mediation has to be non-partisan and neutral. Whose agenda will they carry out in the mediation process? And
okay.
These are all very basic questions which need to it. Of course, the investments, the trade balances, etc., have to be taken into consideration in some other context. Are they arm twisting the world? Because Qatar always had a feeling of deprivation vis-a-vis United Arab Emirates or Saudi Arabia or even the Kuwait or Bahrain, because the higher level of investment and harnessing of them vis-a-vis Qatar. Qatar may be a very rich country, but vis-a-vis the other countries in the north, Middle East like Bahrain or Kuwait or even Saudi Arabia, MBS leadership, they have been little they have not been so prominent as an investment destination or a proper industrial destination. So that is also one of the reasons that they have always under this garb of victimhood or being left out. They have been connecting with all the Muslim Brotherhood, all the Islamic groups and all that, and taking on all sorts of agendas. That is unholy agendas, which is not acceptable. They should be woken up. That is the reason every time 2017 they were expelled. The Abraham Accord, they have been there, they have been doing all sorts of things only because of that level of inferiority complex which the Qataris have. That is it.
Okay. Professor Nalapat, the situation between India and Qatar also becomes more prickly because of the 8 of our former Indian Navy personnel that had been reported for over a year, and now a death penalty awarded to them. It definitely doesn't look like the 8 lakh Indian people that constitute 25% of the Qatari population are going to return anytime soon. So while we have a fight against Qatar because of the terrorist haven that it is, we also have a personal fight to fight because of the dictatorial, anti-human atrocities that are meted out by Qatar against Indians.
No, I'd only like to point out that, as you correctly said, there's a very large Indian diaspora. And the reason for that is that as compared to the Pakistanis, Indians are law-abiding citizens. They work very, very hard. Now, frankly, the Qatar royal family is playing with fire. They may believe that because of this way they're helping, Wahhabis, that they will be protected by the Wahhabis. The fact is, the day the Wahhabis believe they can remove the Al Thani family, and the Wahhabis believe all these sheikhs should be removed, everyone, including the Al Thani family, they will move against them. All this will be of no avail whatsoever. So they are basically shooting themselves in the foot. As far as India is concerned, they are playing China's game, because now a lot of Indians are there in senior management positions in a lot of companies in the Middle East. Not only as workers, as you pointed out, but very senior positions, including advisors to some of the top policymakers in the Middle East. And the point is to paint all of them with the suspicion that India is basically so linked to Israel that is even spying for Israel. And that is designed to basically rouse the Arab populations against Indians. And this is the game that Qatar is playing, trying to anger the Arab populations against Indians, whom they have high respect for, and we have high respect for them. So this is the game they're playing. The Chinese are very, very happy if India's presence in the Middle East is cut down and the Middle East develops anti-India attitudes. And they have worked very hard together with the Qataris. Look at the way Al Jazeera has been talking about, the way India is. They're talking as though minorities are being, slaughtered in India, when the minorities are growing every day and they're proving to be of immense benefit to India as compared to Pakistan. They will never talk about that. They'll only talk lies about India, but 10 times worse than the BBC. And that is because they're playing the Chinese game. They're getting something from the Chinese. They're obviously giving a lot to the Chinese. And the fact is, the Al Thani family needs to realize, ultimately, if the radicals become so powerful, their first target in Qatar will be the Al Thani family.
Okay, fair enough. On that note, I'm out of time. I thank all of you for joining me on the telecast. Obviously, a close eye on Qatar at this point, not just for the terrorist activity that continues to harbor over there in wake of the Israeli war on Hamas, but also on a personal front for India to then save the lives of the 8 Indian Navy personnel who are stuck in Doha.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.